Welcome back. Continuing right along in our topic of query by example. Next, what we're going to look at is creating a computed field. And so all this is just adding in a field into your query that does some sort of calculation based off data that already exists within that record. A good example of this is if you had, say, a store's inventory sheet, and it had, one of the fields was the price for every item in their inventory, and then you want to add in an additional field, a calculated field, that calculated out the price of the item that included sales tax, right? So what you could do is you could put in an expression referencing the price column of the item and then multiply it by 1.08 if the sales tax is 8%, and then that would tell you the total price including tax, right? So we're using data that's already in the record and we're performing a calculation with that data. And it doesn't have to be just numbers either. We can kind of aggregate text if we have fields that we want to combine together as well. So when we're creating these calculated fields, right, we're going to be using our design view again, and we're going to put in a new field name, right? Before, what we did is we selected a field, a column from the list on the top pane, right, and we dragged it down to the grid view on the bottom, or we double clicked it and it added it automatically. But now what we're going to do is we're just going to type in our own field name, and then we're going to calculate out whatever it is that we're trying to calculate. And so when we're doing this in Access and we're using an expression, we always need to, I shouldn't say always, but best practice is to include the column name in square brackets. It is required if the field name, if the column name has a space in it, but if it doesn't, the brackets aren't required, but it's still best practice to always use the brackets just because it kind of keeps things consistent and makes it easier to understand. All right, so let's look at this in action, and it should make a little more sense. So I'm going to come up and create a query, and there we got my design view. So I am going to use the employees table, so we'll throw that up there. And there's all of our columns, all of our fields for our employee table. And so I'm going to use the last name and the title field. And so the third field that I'm going to use is the one that I'm going to create. It's the calculated field. And so to do that, right, we have our field in our grid view here. I'm just going to come to the next available one, and I'm going to give it a name, right? So I'm going to just call it annual salary. And so I'm going to use this field to perform a calculation on data that already exists within the records. And so that particular data is this salary column. So I'm going to name it annual salary, and then I'm going to use a colon, and then that, and here is where I'm going to put in my expression and calculation. So again, with the expression, I'm going to use the square brackets, and I'm going to reference that salary column. So I put the column name in brackets, and then the calculations. What I'm going to do is multiply it by 12. Because we're looking for the annual salary, we're going to multiply it by 12 because the salary column is in months, right? So if we multiply it by 12, it's going to give us the annual salary. So there's that. You can kind of see it looks a little cut off, so there's a couple things that you can do. You can right click on it and then go to zoom, and that will pop open this dialog box here, and here you can actually enter in the field name itself, right? I can change this if I want to name it something else, but that's the calculation that I want. We can also just kind of expand that grid, that column out a little bit so we can see the full thing. But that's it. That's all we need to do to create a computed or calculated field. We're going to give it a name followed by a colon, and then after that colon is what is the calculation that we're going to have the field perform. So let's run this and then take a look at it. So there's the last name, there's the title field, those two that I added, and then the one that I created, annual salary. So we can see the name is just annual salary, the colon, and then expression, calculation isn't part of the name. That colon kind of separates it. And then we can have our salary, our new calculated salary column displayed there inside of our query. So switching back to design view, again, that's all it takes to create this calculated field. You just give it a name, colon, your expression, meaning the column that you want to perform the calculation on, and then whatever calculation that you're trying to accomplish. And just to verify that it is doing the calculation automatically, if I just delete the multiplication and run it again, there we can see the monthly salary, $5,000, $5,500, so on and so forth. Add it back in, run it again, and there's the calculation. Easy peasy. And if we want to look at the SQL code, there it is right there. Still got our select, our from. Again, we're going to get into SQL later on in the course, but it's good for you guys to kind of get a little exposure to it now, get a little familiar with the syntax, but we will get into it a lot more in the upcoming weeks. All right, so that's creating the computed calculated field. Same thing. Yep, there's just a screenshot of what I just did. So great. That's wrapping up this segment, creating a calculated field, still working within our query using our design view, switching back and forth between our different views and being able to pull and retrieve information from our database. So I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next segment.